In this part, we are going to talk about being in the sandwich generation, which means caring for elderly parents and raising children, all while you are working, being married, going to school, and trying to manage other parts of your life. I'm Pamela D. Wilson. I'm your host. I'm your teacher for this session. My background is 20 years of caregiving professionally, and as you know, if you watched the prior section, 20 years almost of being a family caregiver. Let's get started. I'm going to take myself off the camera and we'll go through some housekeeping issues. So if you've read the slide before, if you know this, you do know that I use the term elderly parent or elderly parents. Substitute that for whoever you are caring for. The outline for this module is in the course materials for the program. You can print it out. And I always do recommend, if you have not stopped this video, go back, print out the handout so that you can take notes, because as you'll see on these slides, you see the ... Those are the ellipses. They are purposeful so that you follow along with me through the program. Let's talk about what we hope to accomplish in being in the sandwich generation. At the end of being a working caregiver in the sandwich generation, you should be able to demonstrate an awareness of the pressures faced by working caregivers who care for elderly parents. You should be able to formulate a plan to manage career goals and family relationships, and to initiate practical family discussions about caregiving responsibilities. Workplace concerns. According to a John Hancock study called The Caring Company, workplace concerns about employees caring for elderly parents are growing at a very rapid rate. Raising young children and caring for the elderly is viewed as a family issue by society. It's why we don't talk about it and why caregiving doesn't receive enough attention. You'll also notice that caregiving is not a workplace subject discussed during lunchroom conversations, like retirement is, or marriage, or having children, or going out on maternity leave. Employees talk more about having children and raising families than they do about caring for elderly parents. The workplace has benefits for maternity leave, family leave. Family caregiving does not yet receive equal attention as childcare and maternity leave benefits. Also, according to this John Hancock study, 59% of caregivers fear job discrimination. They fear disclosing being a caregiver to an employer because the study reports that caregivers can be viewed as less reliable. How many of you fall into these fears? Are you afraid of job discrimination? Are you afraid of being viewed as less reliable? Another concern is the level of commitment to a job by caregivers. Some employers will think, oh, Mary or John, they have to care for their elderly parent. That is going to take priority over their work, over showing up for work, and how they interact with other people. I want to take a minute and share a true story. I was working and I was a caregiver when both of my parents were living. When my mom passed away, I had an amazing boss. His name was David. And David said, you know what, go take the week. Go to your parents' funeral, do whatever you have to do, and then come back to work. And when I came back to work, very supportive. It was just, it couldn't have been a better situation. I had the opposite situation when my father passed away and when my brother passed away. I was working at a different company, and my supervisor at the time was a woman named Joan. Joan had no experience with family losses like my prior boss, David. Joan was insensitive, to say the least. She was very focused on career and promotion and what I was going to do for work and all of these things. And there was a point where I honestly had to tell her, I said, Joan, I am not ready to be promoted right now. I want to stay in my current position because I am doing the best I can. I've lost 2 immediate family members in the past 12 months. The grieving has taken a toll on me, I'll be honest. I'm here, I'm committed to my job, I want to work, but making the extra effort that it would take to be promoted right now, it's not for me. In 6 months, I'll be open to it. It'll be great, but right now I can't do it. These are the honest conversations that we have to have with our supervisors and our employers as caregivers so that we're not put in a position where the expectations are so much higher than what we can deliver day to day. Very important conversations to have about caregiving in the workplace. Let's talk about time out of the workplace. Same study, John Hancock. A significant number of caregivers, 32%, that's 1/3, high number. 32% of caregivers voluntarily leave jobs to care for elderly parents. Caregivers resign positions when they feel they can't keep up with work demands or they're afraid of being fired. But not all caregivers realize the full consequences of time out of the workplace or leaving a job from a financial or a career perspective. Leaving the workforce to become a full-time caregiver for an elderly parent means lost income, an inability to save money, lost contributions to Medicare, Social Security, and retirement plans. Studies confirm that the cost of time out of the workforce to care for elderly parents is estimated to be between $75,000 to $300,000. So that is for one single caregiving event. Women care for elderly parents, they raise children, and they care for spouses. So easily triple that number. Instead of deciding to leave a job to be a caregiver, it's important to look at the other options. Can you work weekends? Can you change your shift? Can you occasionally work from home? The question to ask is, what can you do to keep working so that you can support yourself and your family and care for aging parents? When we take an action that doesn't work out, sometimes we tend to play the what if game. And we ask ourselves these questions. What would have helped that situation? Would doing A, B, or C have made a difference? Instead of playing the what if game after leaving the workforce, play the what if game today so that you can brainstorm ideas not to leave the workforce. What can help in this situation is the question to ask. How can I look at the situation differently? Am I thinking realistic about this? What conversations can I have with my supervisor in the workplace to make this work out? Taking time out of the workplace has a significant effect on life. While I know many caregivers who have done this and say they didn't regret leaving work to care for elderly parents, they also admit, on the other hand, that time out of the workplace has negatively affected their career, their family, and their ability to earn income. Let's talk about the financial risks of caregiving for women because these are significant. I'll share some statistics from a Merrill Lynch study called Women in Financial Wellness. It cites that when a woman reaches retirement age, she may have earned a cumulative $1,055,000 less than a man who has continuously stayed in the workforce. If you remember, the slide before this talked about $300,000 lost for every caregiving event. This $1 million figure assumes that women leave the workforce 3 times. Once to have and care for children, a second time to care for an elderly parent, the third time may be early retirement to care for a spouse. These gaps in time out of work accumulate. This is why married couples or partners should talk about the financial challenges that affect women in the workplace. We don't talk about these things. In most marriages, men typically take responsibility for all of the financial planning, and they leave wives and women uninvolved. They leave women out of the picture. The question to ask is, who cares for or who sets up a financial care plan for women? The answer, No one, unless the woman does this for herself or insists to attend financial planning meetings with a husband or insists that the family purchase a long-term care insurance policy for the woman. I highly recommend this because, question, have you ever visited a rehab center or a nursing home? If you have, what do you notice about the people there? According to an article in the Journal of Women's Health, among residents of nursing homes aged 75 to 84, for every 100 men, there are 246 women, 2.5 times more women in nursing homes. And among those persons over age 85, for every 100 men, 425 women, 4 times the number of women. These statistics confirm that we need a greater focus on women's health, women's financial planning, and women's life issues. Women's needs are typically ignored in caregiving situations. More discussions about money and the long-term effects of caregiving are essential within families and as individuals to avoid financial surprises in later years. Women, talk to your family members. Talk to financial planners. Do whatever it takes to make sure that you have the funds to care for yourself when you're older. We talked a little bit about difficulty re-entering the workforce. Even more surprising to caregivers is that being out of the workforce for several years has a significant impact upon attempts to re-enter the workforce, returning to work at the same level of seniority or the same level of financial wages as when you left. Highly unlikely. It may not be possible. Other caregivers find their skills obsolete. That results in re-entry into the workforce at a lower level position because they have to relearn skills or learn new skills because, as we all know, technology changes so quickly. Again, before you decide to leave a job to take care of an elderly parent, strongly consider the short and long-term consequences. Questions again, is it possible to keep your job and work flexible hours? Can you remain employed even if it is part-time? These decisions, these questions, they have a significant impact on retirement and the ability to pay for and receive care when you need it. Being in the sandwich generation. I know it sounds like a funny term, but in addition to being working caregiver, many caregivers are in the sandwich generation. If you're working, caring for an elderly parent, raising children, trying to do a million other things, you are in the sandwich generation. The term sandwich generation originated in 1981 from a social worker. Her name was Dorothy Miller, and it described women in their 30s, 40s, 50s who were stuck, sandwiched, as the primary caregiver for young children and aging parents. A T. Rowe Price study called Parents, Kids, and Money confirms that caregivers learn from the experience of caring for elderly parents. Of course we do, or we at least hope we do. 83% of people in the survey confirmed that having to help care for an older parent or a relative has impacted the way that they think about and plan for retirement. So that's a positive. I always like to say that there is a positive for every negative in life. In the study, 74% of caregivers confirmed that caring for my parent and relative has caused financial strain. In addition to the financial concerns, we know that caregiving takes time away from other parts of the caregiver's lives. Caregivers lose time for self-care, friendships suffer, times for hobbies and activities, they may disappear altogether. Family relationships with a spouse or children become strained. Many working children contribute to the financial care of their elderly parent. The ranges are anywhere from $3,000 a year to $12,000 a year or more. It is significant. Which leads me back to the subject of Devoted caregivers, wives, daughters will eventually need care. Another family discussion gap that I keep mentioning is that the caregiver will eventually need care. In the scope of caregiving, we are all so busy focusing on the person who needs care now, who needs attention now, that we fail to think about the caregiver who may need help in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. The first person in a family to need care receives all of the financial, the people, and the time resources. That person needing care is usually an elderly parent or a spouse. At the time, we don't really talk about financial, people, and time resources. And as we go through this program, those will be subjects that we will discuss. But in the early stages, there's little discussion or concern given to financial, people, or time of care for the elderly parent or of care for that caregiver who will eventually need care. If you're the primary caregiver, you're responsible for raising children and caring for elderly parents. Speak up today. The fact that you will need care must be a family discussion. We have to raise awareness of these concerns early in the caregiving process so that there's a plan to care for the family caregiver, so that we don't spend all of the money on another person, leaving the wife, leaving the daughter, to be that person who ends up as a statistic in a nursing home. Let's summarize what we talked about. Regardless of your situation, whether you are a young caregiver for a grandparent, aunt or uncle, you might be married with children and caring for elderly parents, stress exists and can be managed when we look at change as an opportunity. Look at how the role of being a caregiver has already affected you. How has it affected other people in your life? How can you look at this change as an opportunity? Can being a caregiver help you and your family plan for caregiving within your own family? Will caregiving help you learn more about your health and help your family do the same? Talking about career, money, people, and time is a must-have conversation in families. Don't let this gap create more stress or fear about talking about the realities of caregiving. It's important to schedule a time and intentionally have these conversations. I thank you so much for joining me I'm Pamela D. Wilson, caregiving expert, advocate, and speaker. I will see you in the next webinar.